I am so excited to introduce you to Suezette Yasmin Robotham. And we're going to be diving into her book today. Y'all, I got the book when it first came out. I was in my bed one night reading it and I had tears coming down. Suzette, welcome to Winning Season.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Over the moon, excited to have you here and to talk to you in real life, given that I've had the chance to dive into the book.
I feel like we've been connected online forever. And so for this to be our first time actually talking, it's just been so natural. I'm like, we probably should have been friends from before this. I'm so
Yes,
excited to be here with you. And thank you so much for just also being such an avid supporter of the book. I've really appreciated all that you've done
of
to champion
course.
it.
So let's start with what was the impetus for this book?
Wow. So I will be very honest with you. I think a lot of my life has been people seeing things in me and just, seeing those things and then creating an opportunity for me. And so a girlfriend of mine in the UK in March of 2024 was like, you need to write a book. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, my daddy has always said to me, like, you've got a book in you. Did I know that it would be exactly beyond titles? I don't think I dreamed this book would be it. Um, Quite frankly, it actually is a natural progression from my TEDx talk that I did in 2015 about finding and being authentically myself in the workplace. And so to have created an actual tool and resource that everyone can take into their households and use has become kind of that dream coming into fruition, but literally was a girlfriend being like, you need to have a book and I'm going to create an opportunity to connect you with the publisher to create that book.
The support network that you have around you from reading your book and hearing your story and also following you online, you have cultivated a community that does not play about you.
Hey, and I don't
So,
play about my community.
and that's such a beautiful gift in life. I want to get into the TED Talk in a second, but I think it's important to just put a pin in here because you have people who are speaking life into you and not only speaking life, like write a book, but hey, I'm going to introduce you to a publisher. What do you think is your secret sauce of attracting mutually beneficial people where you get to pour into each other?
I'll say that so to talk about in the book, I am a first generation immigrant child. And so my parents were both the first person on both of their families, my mother being the very first person to come into this country. And so our home was the space for family reunification. And so I have at some point lived with every person in my family that's in the United States for some point in time, which I've loved, right? Because then
Of
you know
course.
your aunts and your cousins, et cetera. But I think what that taught me as a child was the significance and importance of community and what it meant to show up in community, right? And the blessing that it is to give. And in adulthood and through therapy, I've also learned the blessing that it is to also receive. And so I think the thing that has been really foundational to the community I've built is that it has been ingrained in me and seeded in me the significance of showing up and being a contributor and a lover of folks. And so I've grown this like natural, beautiful village of just incredibly dope people that wouldn't trade for the world. And so I'm grateful for that.
Love that. So the subtitle of your book, the book's title is Beyond Titles,
Mhm.
Fearlessly Leading as Your Authentic Self. If we go back 10 years ago, before everyone was doing TEDx talks, you were a leader giving a TEDx talk about authenticity. What is it about authenticity that people get wrong? Like that common misconception?
So I think that we sit with authenticity as this very surface level thing, right?
Mhm.
And so it's, I want to be able to show up and, wear this outfit, or I want to be able to show up and, say whatever it is I feel, right? Like that's authenticity. And I'm like, actually, no.
A minute.
Okay, like that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about from an authentic leadership lens and lane is, are we creating the conditions as leaders that allow not only ourselves, but the voices of our teams, the experience of our teams to be one where people are powering the work from a place of comfort and safety to do their best possible work as their best possible selves, right? And so that looks like really leaning into things like, discernment. It looks like a risk taking. It looks like really being intentional and self-aware, right? Like there are all these layers to the authentic leadership framework that I want to bring into the context is that's more than I was able to have pink nails at work today. And, both from the space of both of my TEDx talk and the book were grounded in Deloitte's study around covering in the workplace, right? And I
Mhm.
think what was fascinating in that 10-year journey is that even though, 10 years has passed, that 61% of people are still going to work, feeling like they have to hide aspects of their identity in order
Yes.
to function, right? Which is then a testament to like think about that then from a productivity scale, right?
Yeah,
That means we're never getting someone's full potential because they're spending some
that
portion
part.
of time, right, thinking about, and in some places, like unconsciously hiding. And when you look then at the data, companies that not only champion but are supportive of environments that allow for authentic leadership perform 147% stronger per share than their competitors.
147%, y'all.
So, what I'm saying is, it's not a feel good. It
Yeah.
is a shift in performance. We don't talk about the cost and what's at stake when you have low retention, right? The amount of time that you're spending in
Yeah.
dollars into replacing talent because you're not creating a supportive environment, right? Like we could do the numbers and the numbers and the numbers, but authentic leadership is not simply you got to show up and wear blue or white, or you got to show up and have pink nails. It's that you got to show up and lead as your best possible self.
And that's such a powerful tool to bring us into the book because while you're talking about going beyond titles and fearlessly leading, I actually found for myself going through the questions that you have at the end of each chapter, those questions help you move through the fear. So you're not saying we're born fearless, right?
Yeah.
You're saying feel the fear and move through it. So I actually want to move into one of my favorite parts of the book. This is the part that felt healing and had me crying. Walk us through the process of you selecting those questions at the end of each chapter.
So I will say, Jacqueline, when I initially did the outline for the book, I don't even know if I knew that I was going to have it'd be more workbook style, right? Like when I designed the
Yeah.
proposal, I knew that it was going to be reflective. I knew that I was going to have lessons. But for me, the thing that sealed the deal was, and especially someone that has worked in education and education reform and has like facilitated adult learning, I'm like, I need people to walk away from this book feeling like they can apply it. And
Okay.
so it's funny because one of my girlfriends was like, not you started the book with pre-work. But I was like, this book is not going to feel applicable to you if you can't see and feel the benefit of what it means for you. And a part of that work is in identifying where you are at, even in your own journey, right?
I knew your book was going to be different because you were like, no, no, we about to get into this.
Right? Like it has to feel applicable, but you have to be able to do that self-assessment, right? And lean into the discernment that is a
Absolutely.
part of authentic leadership, of even being able to identify like where you're at. And so as I begin to design and think about the questions at the end of every chapter, what I wanted to do was create a place for people to be able to then begin doing the unpacking of, okay, like if we
Mhm.
think about the real me versus work me, I can talk about that as Suzette, but have you paused to like identify where you're actually showing up as two versions of yourself in the workplace and then explore why is that? Right? Because
Right.
you can't heal or you can't address what you haven't identified or named, right? And I think the thing that's really
Yes. I just want to pause you there because
Mhm.
when I went through that exercise, I thought I'd been fully authentic myself. The way you phrase that, one, it speaks to your leadership and
Mhm.
how you lead others. I could tell, like, oh, Suzette is somebody I want to work on her team because I'm going to be at full capacity because you worded those questions where even somebody who thinks they're self-aware is like, okay, girl, there's some stuff I can real me, work me. What part of your journey, like give us a story about a moment where you were understanding real you versus work you.
You know, so I think early in my career, especially when I was in education reform, was kind of that first test of I am sitting or trying to exist as two people, and this doesn't feel good, nor does it work. Right. And if I rewind back, what I am grateful for and, will be forever grateful for is I had access to leadership experiences young, right? In
Yeah.
ways that a lot of people, I don't take for granted the blessing of that, right? So have been sitting in rooms with like senior level executives in the school system since I was 23, right? And one of the first lessons I learned in Atlanta public school system was from my mentor was people are always watching you.
Yes.
And so it behooves you to always show up as the best reflection of yourself.
Okay.
Right. And when I transitioned into education reform and keeping that lesson in mind, I'm like, I'm showing up, but this is not my best self because I'm trying to contort into this model and into this, paradigm of being that is not me.
Right.
And so, it's funny because my TEDx talk came out after my very last education reform job. But again, rewinding back to that moment where and I talk about having that conversation with my leader, the dissonance I was feeling, especially when I think about, because the other part that I emphasize throughout the book, this is not just about you feeling great. It's about how do you go to work and have impact.
Yes.
I didn't feel like I could have the impact I wanted because I was spending so much time trying to conform to that style of leading.
Yes. So let's fast forward from education reform to
Mhm.
your in tech. Because if we look at your LinkedIn profile, you have this rock star career. The opportunity seems to be attracted to you. You
Mhm.
have that magic pull of like great opportunities come to me. The titles are also so aspirational that
Yeah.
a lot of us look forward to. Kind of walk us through that transition from education reform into tech.
So I was recruited through LinkedIn.
I love a good
Recruiter.
LinkedIn recruit.
But it also was a space and time in tech. So forevermore, shout out to Michelle, my recruiter at Google. Where in order to scale, right? And I joined Google right when Google Cloud was kind of taking off. In order to scale, they had to be more intentional about the net that they were casting in order to bring talent in. And so where I benefited from that was that I knew how to talk about the transferability of my skill set. So while I'd been in education reform, I'd always been on the human capital business side. And so I, at this point in my career, had done the full spectrum of talent acquisition and human capital work. I've done learning and development. I've done, trainings. I've done hiring. I've built out entire talent acquisition teams. I've built out rubrics, right? And so it was my ability to translate that my ability to lead in the talent acquisition space would benefit and be impactful at Google. I would say what is fascinating though, and what I've appreciated about my tech journey is that I came into tech at a point in time where no matter what your title was, if you owned or were leading work that should be visible at the most highest level of leadership, you had space and opportunity to do that, right? And so I might have been like a team lead or a talent lead, but I had regular access to our directors. I was sitting in trainings next to employee number 8 for Google. And the funny story there, so Ors was employee number 8 at Google, and we were in a training. And I said something in the meeting, and he was like, "Do you know Eileen?" And I look at him and I'm like, "The chief people officer? Yeah, I know Eileen. Who doesn't know our chief people officer?" And he was like, "I want her to meet you because I want her to hear about your idea." And do you
Wow.
know that he emailed her? And the next thing you know, I get an email from Eileen saying, "Or says that you need to meet with me to talk about this idea you have." And she made time to meet with me. So the other thing that I learned in tech in particular, and again, I will honor a name that I've had experiences unique to me. But the
Yes.
thing that I learned that in that space was like title didn't matter, impact and leadership and thoughtfulness and intentionality, right? Like all of those things came together to give me access to other spaces that I
Yes.
wouldn't have dreamed of in other corporate environments. And so what I loved about kind of the gray of tech is that within that gray, your impact wasn't limited because you're an L5 or a program lead or a program manager.
And I think that's a great segue into chapter 6 because
Ooh,
this is now the second time you said someone said you should do something and they made the introduction.
yeah.
I love chapter 6. It's one of my favorite chapters. I am aligned. So, why was it important for you to put that chapter into Beyond Titles?
Because I think a lot of times we, there's two things here, right? And
Okay.
follow me on both of these. There are a lot of times we try to force things to happen, and it's like rolling that boulder. You know, like that Greek mythology, you're trying to roll
Yes.
that boulder
To
up the
hear, I can see
hill,
the vision.
and that sucker coming right on back down.
Yes.
And it's because you're trying to force something up a terrain or down a path or, square through a circle hole, all those things because they're simply not aligned with where you're at or with what's supposed to happen,
Right.
right? But it's also then acknowledging that, and I'm spiritual, so I believe in God, universe, Christ, all those other things, right?
Yes.
But there are those moments then when things line up synchronistically for your best good and your best possible outcome. And those things just flow naturally, right? Like we know when we're in flow. So I give that example
Yes.
of like your perfect day and what makes your perfect day. And it's all of those things lining up with ease and without much
Yes.
force or need for you to do anything but be present in it. And I think sometimes we end up trying to run that rock up that mountain,
Right.
actually pausing to do the exercise of, is this actually me doing it because I'm intended and meant to do it and it's aligned to what I want? Or am I doing it because somebody else has said that I need to do it? And so
Yes.
it's leaning into discernment and judgment about making decisions about what's most aligned for my life and what I want and my principles and my values and how I want to live my life.
So when I was reading this chapter, you know that image that's been on social media a lot? It's like hustle, but then hustle is crossed out and it says align.
Yeah.
I thought about that when I was reading this chapter because specifically for the Black women that I grew up with professionally, it's like work hard, make it happen. We have to do anything. And it really imprint in the subconscious that hustle mentality. What you do with this chapter and with the questions is you help us pull back the layers of that mindset of hustle, hustle, hustle. Because the biggest question I think people have is, okay, well, how do I get into alignment? It sounds good, but how? And you give us the how in chapter 6.
Absolutely. And I give you permission to ask yourself how, right? I think we sit in armor, right? If you think about, growing up and like this is what success looks like, and you have to have the titles and you have to have this experience and you've made it and you're now in big tech and you build this armor around you that gets heavy.
Right.
And if we don't do the work of saying and pausing and being like, hey, but is this what I want? You look
Mm.
up and you've lived a life that looks good to other people but doesn't feel good to you. And I think the thing that we owe ourselves is to be able to look back on life at 80 to say, I lived to the full extent of my life and it was doing things that made me actually feel happy and I found success my own way.
That is such a good point. I wanted to ask you about your membership
Mhm.
because when you say giving yourself permission, it's one thing to want to give yourself permission, it's another thing to make time to give yourself permission. So you have
Mhm.
this dynamic program where you allow professionals to have access to you to help them work through different aspects of their identity and step into beyond titles for themselves. What does that membership look like? And what are some of the things you help people unlock in that program?
Absolutely. So the first cohort is closed, unfortunately. But what the goal is of my mentoring collective. So I offer two types of membership. The mentoring collective is bringing a group of folks together, and I want to be clear because I think sometimes people will gender things, right? So Suzette's a woman and she's only empowering women. No, I'm
Not true.
calling in
Yes.
professionals that are looking to learn and grow and lead as their whole self.
Yes.
Period. And so within this group is an opportunity not only to spend time hearing and learning from me across 6 months, right? So there's a 6 month curriculum in which we're working through everything from like, how do you create your own personal professional narrative from this new lens? So how do you build your network and how do you create community, right? Because again, the one of the thread lines, right, of my life is community. And how does this community pour into each other and how do you build amongst each other, right? Um, and so that is part one. But then I also offer, I call it the elevation experience, but a professional advisory where I'm working with individuals to help them really think through their leadership journey and how they are showing up and what it is that they want to name for themselves, right? Like, yes, I want you to feel great within the context of the role that you're in, but more broadly, how do we build the short and long term, not only plan, but framework for your life so that you're able to really like fully see what your potential is, right? And not limiting your
Right.
potential to an industry or a field or a title, right? Like if you long term want to spend your life doing philanthropy, what are the things and decisions and the muscles that you need to be building now to like realize that life? And so I still am I have a few slots left for my elevation experience, executive coaching. I need to tell my web developer we're going to update the website we'll open the collective up again to take new members later in the summer. But again, it's
Okay.
intentionality around, community, how we pour into each other, but more importantly, the investments we make within ourselves. Because again, I think sometimes, Jacqueline, we have to be told it's okay to invest in yourself and it's not selfish.
Absolutely. I 100% believe that. And I try to share with my friend circle and beyond the importance of having in your annual budget
Mhm.
a line for professional development for programs such as yours, because if we don't prioritize it by putting it in the budget, then it becomes a wish. And then it's like, I'll get to that at some other point when really that is a foundation piece to unlock so much more of what we want in life: time freedom with family and friends, the ability to travel, the wellness that we want. It all starts with that professional development of saying, you know what, let me get with somebody who's an expert and to be able to do the work. One question that I've been noodling on as I went through the books, it was actually in my scribbled down. What are some of the characteristics of leaders that you've admired, regardless of their title?
I love this question. I love this question because I think giving ourselves space and time to learn means, again, learning from others, right? And I think some of the best leaders that I've had the opportunity to learn from are ones who, one, actually lead from a space of curiosity, right? I'm a
Okay.
constant learner. I have a thirst and appetite for learning always. And so leaders that are great at not only modeling curiosity, but creating space for curiosity in their teams, right? And then using curiosity to guide. So I would say one of my favorite ways to lead, especially when I'm trying to get people directionally to my agenda, is to ask questions, right? And I think the
Yes.
best leaders I know ask the best questions, right? To make you think. And even if it's an agenda, right? You've made me think and you've invested me because you've been curious. And
Yes.
so that for sure, it's not going to surprise you. Leaders that are true servant leaders that, know how to guide through others by creating opportunity for others, for sure.
Yeah.
So true servant leaders. I love direct leaders. I'm a direct person by virtue of who I am. And
Yeah.
being in spaces where I was saying, for instance, education reform, where it is a bit more passive aggressive. I like leaders that are like, look, it's not black and white, it's just black.
Right.
And this is what we're doing, right? Because I think it takes out that need to like pacify. And it's like, just say what it is so we know how to move forward. And then I've just always benefited from leaders that have paused to see the best in me and to see the areas of opportunity in me and help me to really identify like what are the things that it is that I want to do next. And so leaders that are there to also like groom and grow and develop and mentor and sponsor.
So, for those leaders, I know you're developing a corporate curriculum as well as a companion to the book. For those leaders who are potentially managers now or organizations who are looking to support their leaders, I love that you pulled out those characteristics and those qualities of these are some of the tangible things that you can be doing. What can organizations look forward to in the curriculum that you'll roll out from Beyond Titles?
So absolutely, they can look forward to. So I have designed and formalized an authentic leadership framework, which I
Okay.
do want to train teams and companies on. But rewinding back, I've been delivering a training called The Power of Empathy, Authenticity, and Vulnerability in the Workplace now for years, right? And so one of my very first clients, 2017, after the TEDx talk, they reached out to me and was like, could you create a training for our entire Canadian leadership team? Actually, I can because again, skill set, I've designed and delivered trainings before.
And you are aligned, and that's how the opportunities just they are attracted to you.
Exactly. So have that training and have done it with other major corporations, but already have trainings that exist that again
Okay.
speak to how do you within the thing that you have or the organization you have really transform the culture to create the conditions and the experience that you want to actually build and have with your team, which if we're honest, right, foundationally, empathy is the through line and the common place where we might be having different experiences, but if we can find empathy for each other, we can work together. And
Yes.
so I 1000% offer trainings that exist. I now have this framework to train. I welcome companies or organizations that are like, you know what, we don't necessarily want the training, but we'd like for you to serve and work with some of our leaders to actually build that muscle. I do some of that for organizations as well, but definitely open to doing trainings and have
So
the framing to do the trainings.
I'm so excited to learn more about that, especially this is something tried and true. You've been doing it since 2017. You have the data to back it up. And ultimately, what you're unlocking for people is how to increase their full capacity in the workplace and for organizations to capture
Mhm.
that capacity.
Absolutely. You know, organizations require people.
Yes. As
And
much as I
you
love a good AI.
Exactly. It's much, listen, first of all, AI at scale, right? If we think about the future work, AI is not yet at the scale to replace people, right?
And I
And
don't think it ever will replace people.
it won't. I and a whole different conversation. I think organizations will not exist without the hearts, the minds, the creativity, the innovation that live within the bodies of humans, right? And the minds of
Right.
humans, right? I think what companies or organizations have the opportunity to do is how do we optimize the talent that we have by creating nations that retain them, that sustain them, that grow them, that develop them, right?
Right.
And how does AI then augment, right? I think AI is a powerful tool to augment. I love, we were talking about it. I'm an AI girly, right? Like I'm
Yes.
about to, continue to build my toolkit. But for the people that you have in seat, how do you get the best out of them so you have the best possible outcome and impact for your shareholders, for your bottom line, for your customers, for your clients? You get your best when your people feel the best.
Yes, that is so true. So I'm mentoring a group of folks who are transitioning
Mhm.
into tech careers.
Mhm.
So I got a couple of questions from them because
Okay.
you're an expert in career development, workforce planning, and leadership development. One person says, how do I make myself palatable if I'm going into an organization? And I got this question from her last night, and I asked her, what do you mean palatable?
Yeah.
well, you know, outwardly, I may look like I'm rough, but how do I come in and not present as a rough person? So I
Mm.
wanted to present that question to you without giving any additional context of a physical appearance, because I think the magic there is a mindset shift, which is one of the things that you help work through in Beyond Titles.
So my first thing, you've heard that sound that say, I don't want to make myself palatable. People could choke. And this is the other
Yes.
thing, if we go back to authentic leadership and what
Hmm.
I mean on about authenticity from a deeper level. Here's the thing, and I say this everywhere, when we are opting to go into companies and organizations that are not our own, we have to
Right.
acknowledge that there is corporate culture, there are company policies, there are also cultural norms. But to some extent, acknowledging the culture and the policies is what is intended to create an environment that is equitable for all, right? So the
Right.
equalizer, the foundation, right? Fine. And so I want to acknowledge that I know that there's corporate culture, there's policies, et cetera, et cetera. What my question back to this woman would be is if you've done the deep dive work and analysis around your passions, your goals, what inspires you, what drives you, what you want to do, I would hold up a lens to any environment that I'm choosing to go into and assess whether or not those things are reflected back to me. Do you have a culture
Right.
that is actually truly inclusive and open to different styles of communication and different styles of being? If not, I think it's okay to say that's not the environment for me. I think sometimes we're so thankful and like just want to be in places so badly that are not the right places for us, right? Like I'll never forget. It's funny, a guy I was dating 2014, having this like career conversation. He was like a CDO, like so much more senior in his career than me. And we were just having a conversation about my what's next.
Yeah.
And he was like, Suzette, traditional corporate culture just might not be for you. And it was the first time that somebody said that to me, right? He was like, I think that you are better cut out for non-traditional environments. And he at that time was like, and I was not on the radar yet. He was like, you might want to think about a Google or an Uber, places that are much more open in terms of like how you dress, how you communicate, the work you do, right? And then it was like an acknowledgement that I probably wouldn't do well, permanently. Happy to partner in an investment banking environment, but I'm much better suited for tech, right? And some of the more loose protocol around like dress and appearance, right? But it's having that discernment for myself about the
Yes.
environment I'm opting into. And so I would say back to her, why would you choose an environment that doesn't find you palatable?
Yes. I love that you walk through that example for the questions, for that response with those questions specifically at the beginning. Because one thing I'm learning about your leadership style is you bring back to the self. You're
Mhm.
pointing us back to who are you? What do you believe in? What's that foundation piece? And then you bring us forward, which one, our time is flying by. I can't believe we're zooming
I
through, which brings me to chapter 10. Another part of the book that really deeply resonated with me is your no titles statement. When you got to the part of the book where you were writing this chapter, what did you want readers to take away from it? Because this is a rich, juicy chapter. The whole book is juicy, but this is like, oh,
All right,
sit down and fill the edges.
let me step back into my book. So here's what I'll say about chapter 10 in particular. And chapter 9, 10, 11 are all this is now your time to do work. I'm done
Yes,
talking to you. I have nothing else to say to you about me. This is all about you, right? Because again, if we honor, there are very few times or spaces where we're asked to do this kind of work.
exactly.
And so when I think about chapter 10 in particular, and why I think chapter 10 even more so than 11, right? Where you do it as a leader, now you need to do it for yourself is even going back, what I'm flipping to is the quote, right? It's the bell hooks quote that honesty and openness are always the foundation of insightful dialogue.
Yes.
Okay. Um, And so for me, why the no titles chapter is important and why this exercise of having people do this is important for me is that it is actually the first time in the book where people are holding up the mirror to themselves and saying, this is who I am with no titles.
Right.
And why I think chapter 10 in particular is important and why people should sit with chapter 10 the longest is because in a world of pivots, in a world where the market is changing, in a world of AI where we are skills based and skills forward, in a world where I want you to be able to leverage discernment and self awareness and risk taking about your future, this is the place where all of those things collide. And it's about having a bigger vision for yourself that doesn't limit you to the things that a title limit to us. Jacqueline, if you only saw yourself as a chief revenue officer, but couldn't see yourself as a head of recruiting because, hey, revenue is sales, recruiting is sales,
Yes.
right? If you couldn't see yourself beyond the confines of a title, you couldn't dream yourself into other opportunities and ways of being, right? And I think chapter 10, to your point around, the work that we do earlier in the book around alignment, chapter 10 is your place to do the application work around actually truly aligning.
That, yes, you're getting under the hood. Page 127, when
Oh,
you get
Lord.
to the synthesize your insights, look for the common threads and patterns in your notes from step 1 and 2.
Hmm.
I feel like that is that big mirror picture where it's a full body mirror. It's not
Hmm.
just like the top of your body. You're standing in that mirror, you're like, woo, I feel exposed here. That is such a revelatory process because as you've said several times, a lot of moments in our life we're just moving to the next. We're not
Hmm.
having the opportunity to go beyond the title and fearlessly lead as our authentic self. And right now you're giving us the blueprint with this book to be like, okay, you want to show up and do this work, this is how you do it. So for that, I'm so appreciative of how you wrote the book, how you thought intentionally about what actually needed to be included to help people unlock those aspects that if you don't take a time out, you might live your whole life and not experience the fullness of knowing who you are.
Yeah, well, one, thank you. And here's the other side of that. And I say this in the book, right? If you hesitate or pause or feel yourself leaning back out, why? That's data. The way
Hmm.
you respond to these exercises, the way you lean in, the way you hesitate, even the length of time that it might take you to finish something is all data for you to then ask yourself, why? Why am I having this response? What's missing? What haven't I addressed? Which is why also I start the book talking about mental health and healing and
Yeah.
having support along the journey. Because again, we have years of experience, years of goodness, years of trauma that influence who we are professionally. And
Yes.
so it's an opportunity to name, okay, I might not be able to answer, let's pick a random question, right? In that chapter. I might not be ready, um, to
I have a
refine.
question that I have highlighted in that chapter.
Okay, because I was like, you might not be ready to refine and own it. If you
Yes,
can't refine and own it, why not? Why can't you own this new narrative about yourself yet?
right. And that why not is powerful. The question that really got me in my tracks, it goes back to what you said in the beginning. The question is, where do you see alignment or dissonance between real you and work you? And even if that level of dissonance is a small gap,
Mm-hmm.
that can be the secret sauce that can allow you to show up at full capacity or to mask. So that question right there was yes.
Also, too, again, I do want to name sometimes covering just becomes unconscious. So you may be working from,
That
and
is
there
true.
is, I talk a little bit about it in the book. Sometimes people are covering at work not because the environment is asking them to, it just becomes habit.
Right.
And so if work you has become a habit, are you now in a space that's safe enough for you to release the need to do that, right? And so it's like naming what is that dissonance, what is the cause of it, and how do you resolve and solve for it for yourself? And if it's this is just how I've always been, okay, do you still need to be that way?
Listen, do you still need to be that way? One of my favorite songs by Solange, she has a line that says, "You say I've changed. It'd be a pity if I stayed the same." And I think about that so
Mm.
much. Like, do I still need to be the version of myself that I was 5 years ago, even 6 months ago? And you encapsulate that perfectly with this
And
book.
and what I want for you, what I want for anybody is to be living and feeling as your best self, ready and open for an abundant universe to bring you God's best and highest good for your life. And sometimes that
Mhm.
means releasing everything that's anchoring you down to an existence that no longer serves you.
Y'all, do you see why I love this book? Up to you all day long, all the nooks and crannies. Thank you so much for coming to the Winning Season podcast. How can people stay connected to you?
Well, first of all, let me give you your flowers. Thank you for creating a space for growth, for development. Thank you for your own vulnerability around where you're at in your journey. Thank you for being a supporter of me. So thank you. I couldn't give you enough
My
flowers in this
pleasure.
moment. I'd love for people to stay connected with me, definitely through my website, so you can stay up to date on resources, tools, my coaching. I have some merch coming soon. So
Okay.
www.suzette, Suezette. Don't forget that first E. My mama gave me that special E. .com. Also on most social media platforms, I'm at Suzette as an early adopter of tech, which should not surprise you, except for TikTok. I don't know who's Suzette on TikTok, but I'm usually at Suzette. I'm at Suezette Yasmin Robotham on TikTok, and those are all linked through my website. There are the companion workbook for the book if you don't want to write or if you have it electronically is there. But I encourage people to reach out, follow the journey, and become a part of my community for sure.
Yes, definitely reach out, get connected. What I think folks should do is buy the book for themselves and for their two closest people so that they can work through it together and have a safe space to unpack some of the questions that they go through. So, my advice winning season, one for you and two for your crew, because this book is definitely going to help everybody level up in a beautiful way. All right,
Thank
until next
you.
time, continue to emulate excellence and eliminate excuses.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I appreciate you.
Thank you.